I'm Tara Wilson, 31, and living with chronic back pain that's shadowed me since college. My family, Dad Walter, Mom Sandra, and golden boy brother Jason, were once my world. We shared everything, including financial trust. Until 3 months ago, when I discovered Dad had emptied my surgery fund for Jason's European vacation. The betrayal cut deeper than my physical pain ever could. Little did they know I still managed their retirement accounts. Before we dive into my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments and hit that subscribe button. You'll want to see what happens when someone who handles finances for a living gets betrayed. Growing up in our middle-class neighborhood in Portland, I adored my family. Our modest two-story house on Maple Street was filled with laughter, family game nights, and the smell of Mom's famous apple pie on Sundays. Dad worked as an engineer at a local firm while Mom taught second grade at the elementary school just blocks from our home. Jason came along when I was 4, and I took my role as big sister seriously from day one. I was the responsible child, straight A's, debate team captain, and student council president. My parents beamed at every award ceremony and college acceptance letter. Meanwhile, Jason was the charming one, the social butterfly who could talk his way out of anything. Even when he failed classes or broke curfew, his smile and quick excuses melted my parents' resolve. "He's just more sensitive than you," Mom would say. "You've always been our rock, Tara." The first fracture in our perfect family picture happened during my sophomore year at Portland State. A skiing trip to Mount Hood with my college friends turned disastrous when I took a bad fall on an intermediate slope. The accident left me with 3 herniated discs and nerve damage that no amount of physical therapy could fully repair. "You'll get better with time," Dad assured me, squeezing my shoulder in the hospital room. Wilsons are fighters. I did fight. Through excruciating physical therapy sessions, experimental treatments, and a cocktail of pain medications that left me foggy and nauseous. I pushed through my finance degree despite days when sitting through lectures felt like torture. While my classmates interned and networked, I split my time between doctor's appointments and studying. By some miracle, I landed a position at a financial advisory firm after graduation. My boss, Frank Martinez, saw potential beyond my physical limitations and created a flexible schedule that accommodated my health needs. Within 5 years, I built a solid client base and reputation. As I established my career, I also stepped into the role of family financial advisor. When Dad mentioned his retirement planning struggles, I immediately offered help. "Let me set this up for you," I said during a Sunday dinner. "I can create accounts that will maximize your savings and give you security." My parents gratefully accepted, and I spent weekends organizing their finances, establishing retirement accounts, and creating investment strategies tailored to their goals. I set up automatic transfers, monitored growth, and gave quarterly updates over Mom's pot roast dinners. "Our brilliant girl," Dad would say, proudly showing Mom the portfolio growth charts I prepared. Meanwhile, Jason bounced between majors at 3 different colleges before dropping out entirely. His resume became a patchwork of short-lived jobs: barista, sales associate, administrative assistant, none lasting more than a few months. "He's still finding himself," Mom would defend when relatives asked about his career. Finding himself apparently required significant financial support. When Jason couldn't make rent, Dad covered it. When his car broke down, a new one appeared in his driveway. When credit card debt mounted from weekend trips with friends, my parents quietly paid it off. I noticed the pattern but said nothing, focusing instead on building my own financial security while managing chronic pain. The older I got, the worse the pain became. Simple activities, grocery shopping, cleaning my apartment, even sitting at my desk, became endurance tests. Dr. Patterson, a specialist in minimally invasive spinal procedures, finally offered hope during an appointment last year. "There's a new procedure that could significantly reduce your pain," she explained, showing me scans of my spine. "It's not a complete cure, but patients report a 70 to 80% reduction in daily pain levels." For the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine a life not dominated by pain. Walking without wincing. Sitting through dinner without shifting constantly. Perhaps even dating again, something I'd put on hold because who wants to hear about nerve damage on a first date? The catch? The innovative procedure wasn't covered by insurance and would cost approximately $45,000 out of pocket. I'll find a way, I told Dr. Patterson, already mentally calculating savings and potential loans. For 14 months, I lived on a strict budget. No vacations, no new clothes, basic groceries. Every spare dollar went into my surgery fund. I picked up extra clients, worked weekends, and sold my collection of vintage cameras that had once been my hobby before pain made it too difficult to hold them steady. Last spring, I finally reached my goal. The surgery was scheduled for June 15th, and I marked each passing day on my calendar with growing excitement. After nearly a decade of chronic pain, relief was within reach. I might be able to go hiking again, I told my friend Alicia over coffee. Can you imagine? Me on a trail, not just looking at nature photos online. Alicia, who had witnessed my worst pain days, squeezed my hand with tears in her eyes. You deserve this, Tara. After everything you've endured. 2 weeks before the scheduled procedure, I planned a small family dinner to share my pre-surgery instructions and recovery plan. I'd need help for the first few days after returning home, and despite our complicated dynamics, family was still family. I've prepared everything, I told my parents, handing them a folder with detailed information. The procedure is 2 weeks from Tuesday. I'll need someone to drive me home and stay the first night, then check-ins for the following week. Mom promised to take time off work. Dad said he'd handle the driving and any errands. Even Jason said he'd come by with movies and takeout during my recovery. For those brief moments, I felt truly supported by my family. The surgery fund represented more than money. It was years of sacrifice, pain management, and hope for a better future. It was my chance to reclaim some normalcy in a life that had been defined by physical limitations since college. Little did I know that within 48 hours, that hope would be shattered by the very people who had promised to support me through it. The morning I discovered the money was gone still plays in my mind with perfect clarity. It was a Monday, and I'd logged into my accounts to transfer the final payment to the surgical center. The balance, which should have shown just over $45,000, displayed a mere $827.13. My first thought was fraud. I frantically called the bank, hands shaking as I navigated the automated system. The customer service representative confirmed my worst fear. This wasn't fraud. A transfer had been made 2 days prior using authorized access credentials. Only 3 people had emergency access to my accounts. Myself, my financial advisor Frank, and my father. Frank would never touch my money without explicit instructions. That left only one possibility. I called my father immediately, trying to keep my voice steady despite the panic rising in my chest. Dad, did you access my surgery fund account over the weekend? The long pause told me everything before he even spoke. Tara, honey, I can explain, he began, his voice carrying that special tone reserved for when Jason had crashed the car or failed another semester. Jason and Melissa have been planning this trip to Europe for months. Her parents backed out of funding their portion, and they were going to cancel. He was devastated. My mind struggled to process his words. You took my surgery money for Jason's vacation? It's not just a vacation, Dad continued, as if that clarification made any difference. It's a cultural experience. 3 weeks through Paris, Rome, and the Greek islands. He and Melissa have been working so hard. Jason had been working at a cell phone store for all of 4 months, his longest employment stint in years. Melissa, his girlfriend of 8 months, was a part-time yoga instructor who lived primarily off her trust fund. Dad, that was $45,000 I saved for a medical procedure. My surgery is in 2 weeks. I know, sweetheart. And we'll help you reschedule once we figure things out financially. Jason just needed this break right now. You know how stressed he gets. The casual way he suggested rescheduling a procedure I'd waited years for, saved meticulously for, and emotionally prepared myself to undergo, struck me like a physical blow. Put Mom on the phone, I demanded, hoping for at least one rational parent. When Sandra took the phone, I expected shock, apologies, promises to fix the situation. Instead, I heard the same enabling tone she'd used throughout Jason's life. Tara, I understand you're upset, but Jason and Melissa had non-refundable deposits on their accommodations. They would have lost thousands. And I've now lost 45,000 and a chance to live without constant pain, I countered, my voice breaking. How could you both do this? You've always been the strong one, Mom said, her go-to phrase whenever they expected me to accept less than Jason. Your brother needed this opportunity. You can still have your surgery, just a bit later. I hung up and immediately drove to their house, pain flaring across my back as I gripped the steering wheel too tightly. When I arrived, Jason's car was in the driveway alongside my parents'. Good, the entire family could face me at once. I found them in the kitchen, the atmosphere tense, but not nearly tense enough for people who had just stolen a life-changing sum from their daughter. Jason was scrolling through his phone, barely looking up when I entered. You stole from me, I said, looking at each of them. You stole money that was meant to help me walk without pain, to help me sleep through the night, to give me some quality of life back. Dad stood, hands raised placatingly. We didn't steal, Tara. I'm an authorized user on that account. We're family, we help each other. Help? When have I ever asked for help? I've managed my condition, worked full-time, even managed your finances, all while saving for this surgery myself. Jason finally looked up from his phone. It's not like your back is going to get worse if you wait a few more months. I've already quit my job for this trip. We leave tomorrow. The casualness of his statement knocked the wind from me. You quit your job? The one you've had for less than 6 months. He shrugged. Melissa's dad is going to help me get into real estate when we get back. This trip is like networking too. I turned back to my parents. So not only did you take my surgery money for his vacation, but you're also supporting him being unemployed again? It's an investment in his future, Mom said firmly. And what about my future? My present? Do you have any idea what it's like to live every day in pain? You're being dramatic, Jason interjected. You still go to work and stuff. I almost laughed at the absurdity. The fact that I maintained employment despite constant pain was being used against me as evidence that I didn't really need relief. I want the money back, I stated flatly. All of it before my surgery date. My parents exchanged glances. Dad cleared his throat. We can start repaying you next month. A little at a time. My surgery is in 2 weeks. Then you'll need to reschedule, Mom said, as if suggesting I move a hair appointment. We simply don't have $45,000 to give you right now. Because you gave it to Jason. For a vacation. And housing costs, Dad added. They're staying in nice places. Europe is expensive, Tara. The realization that they saw absolutely nothing wrong with their actions hit me like a wave. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a temporary lapse in judgment. This was who they were, who they'd always been. I have to call the surgical center and cancel, I said, my voice hollow. Do you understand what this means? I've been preparing for months. I've adjusted medications, completed pre-op protocols. I've arranged time off work. We'll make it up to you, Dad promised. How? When? No specific answer came, just vague assurances that things would work out. Jason had already returned his attention to his phone, scrolling through airfare details with Melissa. I left their house in a daze, tears blurring my vision as I drove home. That night, I made the humiliating call to Dr. Patterson's office to cancel my procedure. The surgical coordinator's sympathetic tone only made it worse. We can reschedule when you're ready, Ms. Wilson, she said kindly. But I should mention that Dr. Patterson is booking 6 months out now, and the procedure cost may increase next quarter. Not only had I lost my surgery date, but I'd also potentially face a higher cost and longer wait if I could save the money again. And all because my brother needed to see the Eiffel Tower with his girlfriend. The next morning, my phone pinged with a notification. Jason had posted on social media a selfie of him and Melissa at the airport, captioned, Europe, here we come. #blessed, #adventure, #living my best life. I threw my phone across the room and collapsed into tears that felt bottomless. The weeks following the cancellation of my surgery blurred together in a haze of increased pain and emotional numbness. I increased my pain medication just to function at work, something I'd carefully avoided for years due to concerns about dependency. My back spasms worsened from stress, creating a vicious cycle of physical and emotional agony. I withdrew from my family completely. Calls went unanswered, texts unread. My mother left voicemails expressing concern about my overreaction, while my father sent emails with links to alternative treatments and payment plans for the surgery, as if I hadn't researched every possible option years ago. Despite my attempts to disconnect, Jason's European adventure invaded my consciousness through social media. My college friend Danielle, unaware of the situation, forwarded one of his posts. "Isn't this your brother? These photos from Santorini are incredible." I couldn't help clicking. There was Jason, arm around Melissa, sunset illuminating their tanned faces against the backdrop of white buildings and blue domes. The caption read, "Living the dream in paradise." Never felt so alive. Each new post twisted the knife deeper. Jason and Melissa sipping champagne atop the Eiffel Tower. Posing by the Trevi Fountain. Dining at a Michelin-starred restaurant in Barcelona. Taking a private boat tour along the Amalfi Coast. The trip had expanded beyond the original 3-week plan to nearly 5 weeks of extravagance. The $45,000 clearly stretched further than even my parents had anticipated. Meanwhile, I could barely walk from my bed to the bathroom without pain shooting down my leg. After 3 weeks of silence, my mother called my office directly. "You need to come to Sunday dinner," she said, no greeting or acknowledgement of the theft that had occurred. "Jason and Melissa are back, and they're sharing photos from their trip. It would look strange if you weren't there. Heaven forbid we look like anything other than a perfect family." "I'm busy," I replied coldly. Tara Jean Wilson, my mother used my full name, a tactic that hadn't worked since I was 16. "Your brother will be hurt if you don't show up. He brought you a gift from Paris." A gift. Purchased with my surgery money. Against my better judgment, I agreed to attend. Perhaps some masochistic part of me needed to see them face the reality of what they'd done. Sunday dinner was surreal. My parents' dining room had been transformed into a shrine to Jason and Melissa's European adventure. Printed photos covered the buffet table, souvenirs dotted every surface, and my mother had even prepared a European-inspired meal of pasta and Greek salad. "There she is," Dad exclaimed when I entered, acting as if the past month hadn't happened. Just in time for Jason's slideshow. They had actually prepared a slideshow. I sat stiffly through 63 photos of Jason and Melissa's cultural experience, each image representing approximately $714 of my surgery fund. No one mentioned my canceled procedure or the source of their travel funding. It was as if my sacrifice had been erased from family history. "And this," Jason said proudly, clicking to a photo of Melissa wearing an expensive-looking gold bracelet, "is what I got her in the jewelry district in Florence. The craftsman said it was one of a kind." My mother clasped her hands. "Isn't it exquisite? They have such wonderful taste." I stared at the delicate gold bracelet that probably cost thousands. My surgery money. On his girlfriend's wrist. When the slideshow finally ended, Jason handed me a small paper bag. "Got you something too, sis." Inside was a keychain of the Eiffel Tower and a refrigerator magnet from Rome. The price tags had been removed, but I'd seen identical items in airport gift shops for under $10 each. "Thanks," I managed, placing them on the table. "Aren't you going to put them on your keys?" Mom prompted. "Maybe later." Jason shrugged, already turning his attention back to Melissa. "We're thinking of going to Japan next spring. Melissa's been dying to see the cherry blossoms." "That sounds wonderful," Dad said enthusiastically. "We should look into flights soon to get the best rates." I nearly choked on my water. "You're planning another international trip?" "Jason doesn't even have a job." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. "Actually," my father began, exchanging glances with my mother, "we've been talking about helping Jason and Melissa with a down payment on a house. They found a beautiful starter home in the West Side neighborhood." The West Side neighborhood was one of the most expensive areas in the city, where starter homes began at $500,000. "And where exactly is this money coming from?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. We've been thinking about accessing some of our retirement funds, Mom said carefully. Just a small portion. A small portion, I repeated. After depleting my surgery fund less than a month ago. Jason rolled his eyes. Are you still on about that? Dad said they'll pay you back eventually. Eventually doesn't help me now, Jason. I'm in constant pain while you're planning your next vacation and house shopping. Pain management is a mental game too, Tara, Melissa interjected with the confidence of someone who taught beginner yoga twice a week. Have you tried meditation? I stood abruptly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I need some water. In the kitchen, I gripped the counter and focused on breathing through the rage and pain threatening to overwhelm me. Through the partially open door, I could hear my family continuing their conversation. She's always been dramatic about her back, Jason's voice drifted in. Remember in college how she used it as an excuse to miss my graduation? I had been hospitalized with pain so severe I couldn't stand that day. She'll come around, Dad assured him. Now, about that down payment. I think we can pull about $60,000 from our retirement account without too much penalty. That would be perfect, Jason exclaimed. The realtor said if we can put down 20%, we'll avoid PMI. They were going to drain their retirement for Jason. Again. After taking my surgery money. The pattern would never end. I drove home in a fog of disbelief and texted my friend Alicia. Need to talk. Free tomorrow. We met at a quiet cafe the following afternoon. Alicia listened without interruption as I recounted everything, the stolen surgery fund, the European extravaganza, and now the planned retirement raid for Jason's house. Tara, she said finally, reaching across the table to grasp my hand, this isn't normal. What they're doing isn't just unfair, it's abusive. They're my family, I said automatically, the programmed response I'd given myself for years. Family doesn't steal your medical funds for someone else's vacation. Family doesn't dismiss your chronic pain. Family doesn't financially enable one child while exploiting another. Her words cracked something open inside me. For years, I'd accepted the uneven distribution of love and support in my family as normal. I was the strong one, the independent one, the successful one, all code for the one we don't need to help. What do? I whispered. Alicia squeezed my hand. You protect yourself because they've proven they won't. That night, I sat at my computer and began researching. First, my legal rights regarding the emergency access I'd granted my father to my accounts, access I immediately revoked. Then, the details of my parents' retirement accounts that I'd established and still managed. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for protection. But as the pieces came together, I realized I might have found both. 2 days after the disastrous family dinner, I received a notification from the investment platform where I managed my parents' retirement accounts. They had initiated a withdrawal request for $65,000, $5,000 more than they'd mentioned at dinner. The form required my approval as the account manager. Instead of immediately approving or denying the request, I decided to perform a thorough review of their account activity, something I hadn't done in detail for months given my focus on saving for surgery. What I discovered left me breathless. Over the past 3 years, my parents had withdrawn nearly $180,000 from their retirement savings. The withdrawal patterns coincided perfectly with Jason's major expenses, $30,000 when he decided to try opening a food truck, which he abandoned after 2 months. $25,000 for a business investment in his friend's startup that never materialized, $40,000 when he decided to take a year off to find himself in Southeast Asia. All this time, I had been diligently managing their investments, growing their nest egg, while they had been systematically depleting it to fund Jason's whims. And now they wanted another $65,000 for his house down payment after taking my surgery fund. The betrayal cut deep, but what hurt more was the realization that they had hidden these withdrawals from me. They knew what they were doing was wrong enough to conceal from the daughter who was working to secure their financial future while fighting through daily pain. I printed everything, account statements, withdrawal records, transfer details, and drove to my parents' house unannounced. It was time for a reckoning. When I arrived, I found not only my parents, but also Jason and Melissa sitting around the dining table with real estate listings spread before them. They looked up in surprise at my unannounced arrival. "Tara, we were just discussing," my father began. I dropped the stack of papers on the table, cutting off his greeting. "Were you discussing how you've withdrawn nearly $200,000 from your retirement accounts over the past 3 years? Or were you just planning the next withdrawal for Jason's house?" The room fell silent. My mother's face paled while my father's reddened. Jason and Melissa exchanged uncomfortable glances. "You had no right to analyze our private transactions," Dad finally said, his tone defensive. "I'm your account manager," I replied evenly. "It's literally my job to know what's happening with the retirement funds I set up for you. The funds I've been growing while you've been depleting them behind my back." "That's our money," Mom interjected. "We can use it how we see fit." "Of course you can. But you've been lying to me for years about it. And now, after taking $45,000 from me, money I saved while working through excruciating pain, you're planning to drain even more of your security for Jason's house down payment." Jason stood up, arms crossed defensively. "Why are you always trying to control everything? It's their money, not yours." "Control?" I laughed bitterly. "I've never controlled anything in this family. I've only ever tried to help, managing Dad and Mom's retirement, offering financial advice, creating budgets none of you follow. Meanwhile, you take and take with no consequences." "We're helping the child who needs it most," Dad stated firmly. "Jason needs more support than you do. You have a stable career, your own place. You've always been independent. Independent because I had to be. And now, when I actually needed help. When I had a chance to reduce the pain I've lived with for a decade, you took that from me for his vacation." Mom sighed dramatically. "That optional surgery again? There are lots of ways to manage back pain, Tara. Jason needed that trip for his mental health. Optional surgery?" The words struck like physical blows. "You think living without constant pain is optional? You think 14 months of saving, of sacrificing everything, was for something optional? You'll never need that surgery anyway," Jason interjected with a dismissive wave. "You've been complaining about your back forever. If it was really that bad, you wouldn't be able to work." Something inside me shattered at his words, the final confirmation that my family would never understand or value my suffering. "You have no idea what I endure every day," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "No idea what it costs me to appear functional. I take maximum doses of pain medication just to sit at my desk. I sleep on the floor half the time because my bed hurts too much. I haven't had a relationship in years because who wants to date someone who can't even sit through a movie without pain?" "You're being melodramatic," Dad said, the same phrase he'd used throughout my childhood whenever I expressed needs or emotions that inconvenienced the family. "Melodramatic?" I grabbed the nearest real estate listing and held it up. "This 5-bedroom house with a pool is melodramatic. Jason's month-long European vacation was melodramatic. My desire to walk without pain is basic human dignity. We've always supported you," Mom insisted. "We were there after your accident. We helped you through college. You drove me to doctor's appointments that insurance covered. Dad claimed me on his insurance until I was 23, as legally required. That's not special support, that's basic parenting. Meanwhile, you've given Jason hundreds of thousands of dollars for his constant failures and whims." "It's not fair to call them failures," Melissa jumped in. "Jason is exploring his options and finding his path. His path has cost nearly $250,000 so far," I countered. "Including money stolen from me." "We didn't steal from you," Dad's voice rose. "I had access to that account. And we're going to pay you back." "When? How?" "You're about to withdraw another $65,000 from your already depleted retirement for his house." "Where exactly is my repayment coming from?" The uncomfortable silence confirmed what I'd suspected. There never was a plan to repay me. "That's what I thought," I said quietly. "You never intended to give me back that money, did you?" "Jason will always be our priority," Dad finally said, the brutal truth laid bare. "He needs us in ways you never have. You'll be fine, you always are." Those words, confirmation that my needs would always come second to Jason's wants, broke something fundamental in our relationship. In that moment, the loving father I thought I had dissolved before my eyes, replaced by a man I barely recognized. "I see," I said, gathering the financial documents I'd brought. "Thank you for finally being honest." I walked out, ignoring their calls to come back and discuss things rationally. In my car, instead of tears, I felt an eerie calm. The fog of hope that they would eventually see me, value me, treat me fairly, had lifted. I could finally see the situation with perfect clarity. That night, in my apartment, I made a decision that would change all our lives. They had shown me exactly where I stood in the family hierarchy. Now it was time I showed them exactly what that position would cost them. The advantage of being a financial advisor is understanding exactly how money works, how it grows, how it's protected, and how it can be legally managed without crossing ethical or legal lines. For years, I'd used this knowledge to benefit my family. Now, I would use it to protect myself. I still had management authority over my parents' retirement accounts I had established, monitored, and grown for them over the years. I had recommended aggressive growth strategies, personally selected high-performing funds, and regularly rebalanced their portfolio to maximize returns. My expertise had helped their modest savings grow substantially despite their frequent withdrawals. After a sleepless night considering my options, I developed a plan that was completely legal, ethically defensible, and would send a crystal-clear message. First, I denied their withdrawal request for the house down payment. This was within my authority as their account manager, especially given the concerning pattern of withdrawals that threatened their long-term security. Next, I systematically moved their investments from the high-growth, higher-risk funds I'd carefully selected into the most conservative, low-yield investment vehicles available. Treasury bonds, money market accounts, fixed-income funds with minimal growth potential but high stability. I didn't take a penny that wasn't mine. I didn't embezzle, steal, or misappropriate anything. I simply changed their investment strategy from aggressive growth to capital preservation, a perfectly reasonable approach for people nearing retirement age. The difference was significant. Under my original investment strategy, their remaining retirement funds could potentially double over the next 10 years with compounded growth and regular contributions. Under the new conservative strategy, they might see growth of 1 to 2% annually, barely keeping pace with inflation. In practical terms, this meant they would still have enough for a basic retirement, but the excess they'd been funneling to Jason would no longer exist. No more house down payments. No more business ventures. No more extended international vacations. Next, I prepared a detailed letter explaining exactly what I had done and why. I included a comprehensive accounting of all their previous withdrawals totaling $182,000 over 3 years. I added the $45,000 taken from my surgery fund. Then I included a calculation showing what my canceled surgery had actually cost me. 1. Direct financial loss, $45,000. 2. Lost opportunity cost on those funds, approximately $4,500 per year. 3. Increased surgery cost due to delay, estimated $3,000 to $5,000. 4. Additional pain medication during delay, $1,200 per year. 5. Lost productivity and sick days, approximately $8,000 per year. 6. Continued physical therapy while waiting, $4,800 per year. The total came to nearly $68,500 for just the first year of delay, not including the incalculable cost of continued physical suffering and diminished quality of life. I concluded the letter with clear terms. I have restructured your investments to ensure you have enough for basic retirement needs. The high growth potential that would have funded Jason's ongoing financial requests has been eliminated. I have also removed myself as account manager effective immediately following these changes. This action represents my final contribution to our family's financial planning. I have not taken anything that wasn't mine, nor have I compromised your basic security. I have simply ensured that the remaining funds will be used for their intended purpose, your retirement, rather than continuing to enable Jason's financial dependence. The surgery fund you took from me represented years of sacrifice and hope for relief from constant pain. Its loss cannot be measured purely in dollars. Consider this restructuring of your accounts as my formal response to where I stand in your priorities. Tara. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house. It was early, barely 7 a.m., but lights were already on inside. I rang the doorbell, letter in hand. My father answered, surprise evident on his face. "Tara? What are you doing here so early?" "I need to speak with everyone," I said calmly. "Is Jason here?" "He and Melissa stayed over last night. They're still asleep. Wake them. This concerns all of you." Something in my tone must have conveyed the seriousness of the situation because he didn't argue, simply called up the stairs for Mom and went to rouse Jason and Melissa. When all four of them had assembled in the living room, expressions ranging from annoyed, Jason, to concerned, Mom, I handed my father the sealed envelope. "What's this?" he asked. "Read it. Out loud, please." As he read, his face went from confusion to shock to anger. My mother gasped at several points. Jason leapt to his feet before Dad even finished. "You can't do this," he shouted. "That's their retirement money." "Yes, it is," I agreed. "For retirement. Not for your house down payment, not for your vacations, not for your failed business ventures." "This is vindictive and cruel," my mother said, tears welling in her eyes. "How could you do this to us? How could you steal my surgery fund for Jason's vacation?" I countered. "How could you dismiss my pain as optional? How could you lie about repaying me while planning to give him even more?" "We'll sue you," my father threatened, waving the letter. "This has to be illegal." "It's not. I've changed your investment strategy to one that's actually more appropriate for your age and retirement timeline. I've ensured you have enough for your basic needs. I haven't taken a single penny. Feel free to consult with another financial advisor or attorney. They'll confirm everything I've done is completely legal." Jason was frantically scrolling through his phone. "What about our house? We put in an offer yesterday. You'll need to withdraw it or find alternative financing," I said. "Perhaps get a job and save for a down payment like most people do." "You've destroyed our retirement plans," Dad said, his voice shaking with rage. "No, you did that by withdrawing nearly $200,000 to fund Jason's lifestyle. I've simply ensured the remaining funds will actually be used for retirement." Melissa, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. "This is about the surgery money, isn't it? We can pay you back for that if it's such a big deal." "This is about much more than money," I replied. "This is about years of being devalued and dismissed. This is about having my needs sacrificed for Jason's wants. This is about finally establishing consequences in a family that has never had them." "Get out of our house," my father demanded. I nodded, already moving toward the door. "I've removed myself as your account manager. Any future financial decisions are entirely yours." "You'll regret this," Jason called after me. "Family is supposed to support each other." I paused at the door and looked back at them, my father clutching the letter with white knuckles, my mother crying quietly, Jason and Melissa in disbelieving anger. "That's exactly what I've been trying to tell you for years," I said softly, and closed the door behind me. Walking to my car, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: regret that it had come to this, satisfaction that I had finally stood up for myself, and, most surprisingly, relief. For the first time in my adult life, I had set a boundary with my family that couldn't be ignored or dismissed. I had canceled their excess retirement funds just as they had canceled my surgery. The difference was, they would still have their basic needs met in retirement. I was still left with daily, debilitating pain. As I drove away, I knew bridges had been burned. But some bridges lead nowhere worth going, and it was time I stopped crossing them. The aftermath was as explosive as I expected. Within hours of leaving my parents' house, my phone exploded with notifications. Texts from Jason calling me heartless and cruel. Voicemails from my mother alternating between sobbing and cold anger. Emails from my father threatening legal action and demanding I reverse the changes immediately. I responded to none of them. Extended family members began reaching out within days. Apparently, my parents had shared their version of events, one that conveniently omitted the theft of my surgery fund and painted me as a vengeful daughter who had sabotaged their retirement out of spite. "How could you do this to your parents after everything they've done for you?" my cousin Tracy wrote. Uncle Phil called to talk some sense into me, insisting that family disagreements shouldn't involve financial warfare. I crafted a single, brief response that I sent to anyone who reached out. This is a private matter between my immediate family and me. I appreciate your concern, but I will not be discussing the details. Some interpreted my refusal to defend myself as confirmation of guilt. Others sensed there was more to the story and backed off. I didn't have the energy to care about their opinions either way. 1 week after what I now thought of as the confrontation, I began seeing a therapist, Dr. Laura Zimmerman. In our first session, I broke down while describing the family dynamics I'd normalized for decades. I feel guilty, I admitted, tissues crumpled in my hand. Part of me thinks I went too far. Tell me about that part, Dr. Zimmerman prompted. They're my parents. I was raised to respect them, to be grateful for what they provided. Taking control of their finances feels disrespectful. Did they respect you when they took your surgery fund? The question hung in the air, unanswerable. In our sessions, I began to recognize patterns that had shaped our family for decades. How my responsibility had been weaponized against me. How Jason's helplessness had been cultivated and rewarded. How my pain, both physical and emotional, had been consistently minimized. You're grieving, Dr. Zimmerman observed in our third session. Not just the loss of your surgery opportunity, but the loss of the family you thought you had. She was right. I was mourning the parents I'd believed in, the brother I'd protected, the family unit I'd sacrificed to maintain. 2 weeks after the confrontation, my father called my office. I let it go to voicemail, then listened with growing dismay. Tara, we met with another financial advisor today. He says what you did was technically legal, but ethically questionable. He can help us gradually move back to more aggressive investments, but it will take time and we'll never recover the growth potential we've lost. Jason and Melissa had to withdraw their offer on the house. Your mother cries every night. I hope you're satisfied with what you've done to this family. No mention of what they had done to me. No acknowledgement of the stolen surgery fund. No apology. The next day, I received a surprising call from Aunt Nancy, my mother's sister. Nancy had always been the family maverick, divorced, childless by choice, pursuing a career in marine biology that took her around the world. She and my mother had a strained relationship, and she rarely attended family functions. I heard about what happened, she said without preamble. Your mother called me in tears about her ungrateful daughter destroying their retirement. I braced myself for another lecture. I didn't believe her for a second, Nancy continued, surprising me. Sandra has enabled Jason his entire life. I want to hear your side. For the first time, I told the complete story to someone who knew my family intimately. Nancy listened without interruption, occasionally making sounds of disbelief or anger on my behalf. That surgery fund, she said when I finished. How much was it again? $45,000. There was a pause on the line. I'd like to help you rebuild it. Aunt Nancy, I can't accept. You can and you will, she cut me off firmly. I've been blessed with a good career and no children to put through college. I've watched you fight through pain for years while your parents poured resources into Jason's latest whims. Let me do this. Tears streamed down my face. Why would you do this for me? Because someone in this family should have been doing it all along, she replied simply. And because I know what it's like to be the family disappointment for choosing your own well-being. With Nancy's help, I was able to schedule the surgery for November, 5 months after the original date. The delay meant working through a summer of increased pain, but for the first time in months, I had concrete hope again. Meanwhile, the situation with my immediate family evolved in unexpected ways. 3 weeks after our confrontation, I received a text from Melissa. Jason and I broke up. Thought you should know. I wasn't surprised. Their relationship had flourished in an environment of parental subsidy and European vacations. Without the promise of a free house and continued financial support, the foundation had crumbled. What did surprise me was the email from Jason that arrived a week later. I got a job at Lewis and Clark Credit Union as a loan officer trainee. The pay isn't great, but they offer tuition assistance for finance classes. I'm staying in a studio apartment on Hawthorne. Mom and Dad wanted me to move back home, but I said no. I'm not saying you were right about everything, but maybe I needed this kick in the ass. Still mad at you though. It wasn't an apology, but it was something, the first indication that my brother might eventually become a functioning adult. My parents were less adaptable. Dad continued sending emails detailing the consequences of my actions, how they were meeting with financial advisors, how their retirement projections had been dramatically reduced, how they might need to sell the house they'd planned to retire in. Every message was crafted to maximize guilt, but notably, none acknowledged their role in the situation. Mom took a different approach, sending nostalgic family photos and memories from my childhood. Remember when we took you to your first day of kindergarten? You were so brave, not a single tear. Or found this photo of us at Lake Chelan. You were always Daddy's fishing buddy. These attempts to rewrite our family history as idyllic hurt more than Dad's angry messages. They revealed how committed she was to the fantasy of our perfect family, regardless of reality. For months after the confrontation, I ran into my father at the grocery store. It was bound to happen eventually in a city of our size. We stared at each other across the produce section, both frozen in indecision. Finally, he approached, looking older than I remembered. "Your mother misses you," he said simply. "I miss who I thought you both were," I replied. He nodded slowly. "The financial advisor has us on a strict budget now. No more withdrawals from retirement accounts." It wasn't an apology, but it was an acknowledgement, however small, that their previous behavior had been problematic. "Good," I said. "That's what I was trying to help you achieve all along. Jason's working now. Did you know?" He told me. Dad seemed surprised by this. "You two are in contact?" One email, I clarified. "Not exactly a relationship." He shifted uncomfortably. "Your surgery. Did you find a way?" "Aunt Nancy helped me. I'm scheduled for November." Something flickered across his face, relief, shame, or perhaps both. "That's good. We want you to be well, Tara. Despite what you might think." Wanting and acting are different things, Dad. We parted without resolution, both carrying the weight of a broken relationship neither of us quite knew how to repair. But for the first time, I felt I had stood my ground without being dismissed or diminished. It was a start, however small. As my surgery date approached, I found myself reflecting on the painful journey of the past months. The theft of my surgery fund had been devastating, but it had also forced me to confront family dynamics I'd accepted for far too long. Through the pain, I had found my voice, my boundaries, and surprisingly, unexpected support from Aunt Nancy. I didn't know what the future held for my relationship with my family. Reconciliation seemed distant, full restoration unlikely. But I was finally prioritizing my own well-being after a lifetime of being the responsible, self-sacrificing daughter. And that, regardless of what happened next, felt like healing had already begun. November arrived with crisp air and falling leaves. 6 months after the original surgery date, I finally checked into Salem Memorial Hospital for the procedure that had been both my hope and the catalyst for family upheaval. Aunt Nancy drove me to the hospital at 5:30 a.m., her calm presence steadying my nerves. As the nurse prepared my intake forms, she asked, "Will any family members be visiting during your stay?" Nancy squeezed my hand. "I'm her family," she said firmly. "I'll be here." The procedure took 4 hours. When I woke in recovery, groggy and disoriented, Nancy was there, reading a marine biology journal in the chair beside my bed. "Hey, warrior," she smiled when she saw my eyes open. "Doctor says everything went perfectly." The next few days passed in a blur of pain medication, careful movement, and the strange sensation of a different kind of pain, surgical pain rather than the chronic agony I'd lived with for years. This pain had purpose. This pain would end. During my 3-day hospital stay, my phone remained silent from my immediate family. I'd informed no one except Aunt Nancy and my friend Alicia about the surgery date. Yet somehow, on the second day, a large arrangement of sunflowers appeared in my room with a simple card, "Wishing you healing. Jason." How had he known? Perhaps through family connections, or maybe Alicia had mentioned it to a mutual acquaintance. The gesture was unexpected and complicated my neatly categorized feelings about my brother. Recovery at home was challenging but hopeful. Nancy stayed with me for the first week, working remotely from my dining table between helping with meals and medication. Alicia took the second week, bringing movies and gossip to distract me during the most painful parts of recovery. Physical healing came gradually. First, the revelation of sitting in a chair without constant shifting to alleviate pressure. Then, walking to the mailbox without bracing for each step. Finally, one morning 3 weeks post-surgery, I realized I had slept through the night without waking from pain, the first time in nearly a decade. Dr. Patterson had been right. The procedure wasn't a miracle cure, but it reduced my pain by approximately 70%. The constant backdrop of agony that had colored every moment of my life faded to occasional discomfort. I reduced my pain medication by half, then 3/4, experiencing clarity and energy I'd forgotten was possible. As my body healed, I maintained the boundaries I'd established with my family. No holiday gatherings. No Sunday dinners. Minimal communication limited to brief texts acknowledging birthdays or major events. It wasn't anger driving this distance, it was self-preservation and the guidance from Dr. Zimmerman about healthy boundaries. 3 months post-surgery, in February, I received an unexpected email from Jason. I'm getting my financial counselor certification. Working full-time at the credit union and taking night classes. The apartment still sucks, but it's mine. Mom and Dad are struggling with the retirement situation. They won't admit it, but they're scared. I don't expect you to fix it. Just thought you should know. I considered ignoring it, but something prompted me to respond. Congratulations on the certification program. That's a solid career path. His reply came quickly. Thanks. I owe you an apology for the Europe trip. I knew where the money came from. I knew what it meant to you. I went anyway. I'm sorry. The acknowledgement, so long awaited, brought tears to my eyes. Not because it fixed anything, but because it represented the first crack in the family mythology that had protected Jason from consequences his entire life. Thank you for saying that, I wrote back. It matters. We began a cautious email exchange every few weeks. He shared updates about his classes and work. I offered occasional advice on financial certification exams. We carefully avoided deeper family topics, building a fragile bridge of communication that existed outside our shared history. In April, 6 months after my surgery, I received a letter from my parents. Not an email or text, an actual letter in my mailbox, written in my mother's careful handwriting. Dear Tara, we understand if you don't want to hear from us. We've respected your distance these past months, though it has been incredibly painful. We're writing because we've had time to reflect on everything that happened. We met with a family therapist, Dr. Benson, who helped us see patterns we've been blind to for decades. The favoritism toward Jason. The expectations placed on you. The ways we've dismissed your needs while catering to his wants. We were wrong to take your surgery money. There is no justification for that action, and we are deeply ashamed. We've started a repayment fund and have enclosed the first check for $5,000. It's not enough, but it's a start. We will continue monthly payments until the full amount is restored. If you're willing, we would like to meet, perhaps with our therapist present. We understand if you're not ready. We just want you to know that we're trying to understand the harm we've caused. With love and regret. Mom and Dad. Enclosed was a check for $5,000, the first acknowledgement of the debt beyond empty promises. I sat with the letter for days, discussing it with Dr. Zimmerman in our weekly session. What do you want from this relationship moving forward? She asked. I don't know if I can trust them again, I admitted. But I don't want to carry this anger forever. Trust and forgiveness are different things, she reminded me. You can forgive them for your own peace without trusting them with your financial or emotional security again. After careful consideration, I agreed to meet them, not at their house or mine, but on neutral ground at Dr. Benson's office. The session was scheduled for early May, nearly a year after they had taken my surgery fund. Walking into the therapist's office, I was struck by how small my parents looked. My father, once the towering authority figure of my childhood, seemed diminished, his shoulders slightly stooped. My mother's hair had more gray than I remembered. Dr. Benson facilitated with calm professionalism, establishing ground rules for our conversation. When it was their turn to speak, my father went first. Tara, we failed you, he said, his voice cracking. Not just with the surgery fund, but for years before that. We placed unfair expectations on you because you were capable. We gave Jason endless chances because he struggled. We never considered how that affected you. My mother wiped tears. When you changed our retirement investments, we were furious. But it forced us to see what we'd been doing, not just to our financial future, but to both our children. Jason needed limits we never set. You needed support we never gave. We're in financial counseling now, Dad continued. Living on a strict budget. The house is on the market, too big for us anyway. We're downsizing to a condo that makes more sense for retirement. And Jason? I asked. We're learning to let him stand on his own, Mom said. It's hard. We want to rescue him when things get difficult. But we're trying. It wasn't a perfect conversation. There were defensive moments, old patterns threatening to resurface. But it was honest in a way our family interactions had rarely been. I'm not ready for regular family gatherings, I told them at the end of the session. But I'm willing to keep talking with Dr. Benson's help. It was a beginning, tentative and fragile, but real. Over the following months, we continued meeting with Dr. Benson twice monthly. Painful truths emerged. Tears were shed. Old wounds were examined rather than bandaged over with denial. It wasn't healing so much as lancing, bringing the infection of dysfunction to the surface so real healing could begin. Jason joined us for a session in August. He'd completed his financial certification and received a promotion at the credit union. The entitled young man who had once taken my surgery money for European adventures had been replaced by someone with a growing awareness of consequences and responsibility. I didn't understand what your back pain really meant, he admitted during the session. I thought you were just complaining. I never imagined what it was like to live with that every day. Aunt Nancy remained my steadfast supporter throughout this process, reminding me that reconciliation didn't mean returning to old patterns. Forgiveness doesn't require forgetting, she would say. And love doesn't require blind trust. By the 1-year anniversary of my surgery, my parents had repaid $20,000 of the $45,000. They had sold their house and moved into a modest condo, embracing a simpler lifestyle that actually prepared them for retirement. Jason had moved to a better apartment and was dating someone new, a kindergarten teacher who seemed unimpressed by material displays of affection. As for me, the physical healing from surgery had plateaued at about 75% improvement, better than I'd dared hope. I could walk without pain, sit through movies, even try hiking gentle trails with Alicia on weekends. The remaining discomfort was manageable with minimal medication and regular physical therapy. The emotional healing was more complex. There were still days when anger flared hot and bright at the memory of their betrayal. Times when I questioned whether reconciliation was worth the effort. Moments when the old pain of being undervalued threatened to overwhelm the progress we'd made. But there was also a new sense of freedom that came from establishing and maintaining boundaries. A confidence born from standing up for myself. A support network I'd built outside the constraints of family obligation. One evening, sitting on my small balcony watching the sunset with Aunt Nancy, I tried to articulate this complicated journey. I never wanted to cancel their retirement, I confessed. I just wanted them to really see me for once. Nancy nodded, understanding in her eyes. Sometimes people can only see clearly when the comfortable patterns are disrupted. You gave them that disruption. At a high cost. Yes, she agreed. But what would the cost have been if you'd continued as the responsible daughter who sacrifices everything while they enabled Jason's dependence? Some prices are worth paying for freedom. She was right. The journey had been painful, the relationships forever altered. But I had found a version of myself that wasn't defined by family expectations or chronic pain, a self that could set boundaries, demand respect, and prioritize my own well-being without guilt. Perhaps that was the true healing, not the surgical procedure that reduced my physical pain, but the emotional surgery that excised patterns of sacrifice and dismissal that had led. I don't know what the future holds for my family. Reconciliation continues in small, imperfect steps. Trust rebuilds slowly, if at all. But I know with certainty that I'll never again silence my needs or accept dismissal of my pain, physical or emotional, for the comfort of others. Sometimes, standing up for yourself means making difficult choices that others won't understand. Sometimes healing requires disruption before reconstruction can begin. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to break patterns that harm, even when that breaking is painful. I'm still learning to navigate this new terrain of self-advocacy and boundaries. Still balancing forgiveness with self-protection. Still discovering who I am beyond the roles I've played. But for the first time in my adult life, I'm doing so on my own terms, with my own voice, and without constant pain shadowing every step. And that, despite everything, feels like victory. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to prioritize your own well-being over family expectations? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in these challenging situations can be incredibly healing. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about setting boundaries and finding self-worth. Thank you for listening to my journey. May it help you find courage in your own.